Maria hurried through the crowded streets of the city, the cool evening air brushing against her face. She was a woman of power, wealth, influence, everything she could possibly need. Yet, in this moment, there was a yearning, a deep sense of emptiness that money couldn't fill. She often thought of her lost daughter, Lily, whom she hadn't seen since she was a baby. The memory of the child's innocent face lingered in her mind like a shadow, one she couldn't shake no matter how hard she tried. Tonight, Maria had decided to visit a small cafe on the edge of town, a place she had passed countless times but never entered. The cafe had a charm to it, something that reminded her of simpler times. She wasn't expecting anything extraordinary, just a quiet evening to herself. But fate had different plans. As she stepped through the door, the soft chime of the bell above the entrance echoed, drawing the attention of the few patrons inside. Maria glanced around, her eyes briefly pausing on the barista who greeted her with a warm smile. She ordered her usual coffee and sat by the window, her mind drifting to memories of a time long past. But then, a voice broke her from her reverie. "Excuse me, is this seat taken?" The woman's voice was soft, yet unmistakably confident. Maria looked up, her gaze meeting that of a young woman, probably in her late 20s. She was wearing a waitress uniform, her hair tied up neatly in a ponytail, but there was something familiar about her. Something that made Maria's heart race, though she couldn't place why. "No, please, go ahead," Maria replied, her voice tinged with a curiosity she couldn't explain. The woman sat down at the table opposite Maria, glancing at her for a brief moment before looking down at the notepad in her hands. Maria studied her, trying to figure out why this woman seemed so familiar. Was it her eyes? The shape of her face? Or perhaps it was something deeper, something intangible that stirred a feeling in Maria's chest. The waitress looked up again, her gaze meeting Maria's. "You look like someone I used to know," she said, almost as if speaking to herself. Then, as if she hadn't said anything out of the ordinary, she quickly shifted her attention to the nearby counter. Maria was taken aback. Could it be? Could this be the daughter she had lost all those years ago? The resemblance was striking, but she couldn't be sure. She had to find out. Her hand instinctively reached for the pendant hanging around her neck. It was an old piece of jewelry, passed down through generations. A simple silver pendant with a delicate engraving that had always felt special to Maria, though she never fully understood its significance. Her mother had given it to her the night before she disappeared, a piece of advice that she would never forget. "This pendant will guide you, Maria. Keep it close to your heart. You'll know when it's time." Maria often wondered what that cryptic warning had meant. And yet, in this moment, as she stared at the waitress, the pendant suddenly felt warmer against her skin, almost as if it were alive. She looked down at it, then back up at the woman. Her breath caught in her throat. The pendant's warmth seemed to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. Maria's hands trembled slightly as she stood up, slowly walking toward the counter. She didn't know why, but something deep inside her urged her to speak to the waitress. To find out if this woman was truly her daughter. She had to know. "Excuse me," Maria began, her voice barely above a whisper. The waitress looked up, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Can I help you with something?" she asked, though her tone seemed almost guarded. Maria felt a strange hesitation in her chest. Was this the moment? Was this woman truly her daughter, the child she had lost all those years ago? Or was it simply a wild coincidence? And why did the pendant feel so warm, almost as if it were reacting to her presence? Before she could speak again, the waitress did something unexpected. She reached up and touched the pendant around her own neck, a gesture that seemed completely random. But when she did, the temperature in the room seemed to drop, and Maria's heart skipped a beat. The waitress noticed Maria's gaze and, with a slight shrug, said, "Funny. I've had this pendant for as long as I can remember. My mother gave it to me before she disappeared." Maria felt a shock run through her body, her breath catching in her throat. The pendant, the same pendant. The pendant that had belonged to her mother. The pendant that had been passed down to her. Maria's mind raced. Was it possible? Could this woman, this waitress, be her long-lost daughter, Lily? But before Maria could ask another question, the woman quickly turned, walking away to tend to a customer at the counter. The warmth from the pendant lingered against her skin, and Maria was left standing there, frozen, unable to move. Her heart pounded in her chest, and for the first time in years, she felt something stirring within her, a sense of hope, a sense of urgency. She couldn't let this moment slip away. She had to know the truth. But what was the truth? What had she stumbled upon, and what did it mean for her, for Lily, and for the future? The suspense was unbearable. Maria had to act quickly. There was no time to waste. She was standing on the precipice of something monumental, something that would change everything. But how would she ever uncover the full story? And would she be able to handle the shocking truths that lay ahead? Maria sat back down at her table, her mind swirling with thoughts, each more frantic than the last. The pendant, her mother's pendant, had never been a mere piece of jewelry to her. It was a connection to a past that Maria had tried to bury for so long. And now, it was leading her back to something, or someone, she hadn't seen in years. Lily. She couldn't let this moment slip away, not when she felt so close to the truth. But what was the truth? Could this waitress really be her daughter, the child she had been forced to leave behind? Maria's thoughts raced as she watched the woman at the counter, her back turned, unaware of the storm brewing inside Maria's mind. The pendant's warmth against her chest seemed to grow more intense, as though urging her to take action. Maria couldn't wait any longer. She stood up, her legs slightly trembling as she made her way toward the counter. Every step felt like a decision that would change the course of her life, and perhaps the life of the young woman who had no idea who she was. As she approached, the waitress, Lily, turned around, meeting Maria's gaze. There was a flicker of recognition in the young woman's eyes, but it disappeared almost immediately. She gave a polite smile, though there was a hint of uncertainty in it. "Can I get you anything else?" she asked, her voice still soft but now laced with an underlying tension, as if she were trying to hide something. Maria hesitated for a moment, then asked, her voice trembling slightly, Do you have a family? A mother? Someone who gave you that pendant?" The question hung in the air between them, charged with an energy that neither of them could ignore. The young woman's expression faltered for just a second, but she quickly regained her composure. "I don't really know much about my family," she replied, avoiding Maria's gaze. "I was raised in foster care. The pendant was the only thing I had left from my mother." Maria's heart raced. The pieces were falling into place, but it didn't make sense. Lily had been so young when Maria had to leave her, so young that she couldn't possibly remember her. And yet, here she was, wearing the same pendant, the one Maria had kept so close all these years. Before Maria could say another word, the young woman, Lily, though Maria still couldn't bring herself to call her that, turned away to attend to another customer. But this time, Maria didn't let her go. She followed her, the pull of the pendant growing stronger, almost guiding her steps. "Wait," Maria said, her voice more urgent now. "I need to talk to you. Please, just hear me out." Lily stopped in her tracks and turned to face her, her expression softening. "Look, I'm sorry, I really don't know what this is all about, but I have a job to do." She spoke with the weariness of someone who had long since learned how to shut people out. But Maria could see the vulnerability in her eyes, the uncertainty behind her words. Something inside her told her that the young woman wasn't just pushing her away, she was afraid. Afraid of what? Of the truth? Maria knew she couldn't force the answers out of her. But she also knew she couldn't walk away without knowing more. There had to be a reason this woman was wearing that pendant. A reason her mother had given it to her. I understand, Maria said quietly. But please, I have something I need to show you. Something I think you'll want to see. She fumbled with the pendant in her hand, then gently held it out, offering it to Lily. For a long moment, Lily just stared at it. Then, slowly, she reached out, her fingers brushing against the cool silver. Her breath caught, and for the first time, her eyes softened with a kind of recognition. I've seen this before, Lily whispered, her voice barely audible. She took the pendant from Maria's hand, holding it up to the light. My mother used to wear something just like this. She said it would help me find her someday. Maria's chest tightened. She could hardly breathe. The words she had been waiting for, the confirmation she had been desperate to hear, were finally spoken. But even though she had been right, even though she had found Lily, the reality was more complicated than she had imagined. Lily's mother, Maria, hadn't been there to raise her. She had disappeared. And Lily had spent her entire life wondering about her. Wondering if she would ever find the mother who had left her behind. Maria felt the weight of that guilt all over again. The years of separation, the pain of losing her daughter, all flooded back in an overwhelming rush. She had no idea what Lily had gone through, what kind of life she had lived. How had the young woman turned out? What had happened to her in the years Maria had been absent? Lily dropped her gaze, her fingers still clutching the pendant, and Maria could see the struggle in her eyes. She wasn't ready. She wasn't ready to confront the woman who had given her up. I'm sorry, Maria said softly, her heart breaking. I didn't mean to overwhelm you. But I think we have a lot to talk about. Lily didn't respond at first. Instead, she simply nodded, then turned and walked away, leaving Maria standing there, once again alone with her thoughts. Maria stood frozen in place, her mind racing with questions. What had she uncovered in these few moments? Was this really the reunion she had hoped for? Or was it just the beginning of a far deeper mystery? The pendant in Maria's hand was warm again, its warmth a reminder that this story wasn't over. In fact, it was only just beginning. Maria stood still in the cafe, her hand still gripping the pendant as if it were the only thing keeping her grounded. The warmth of it seemed to echo her racing heartbeat, the silent reminder that something had shifted, something she couldn't yet comprehend. She had just uncovered the most important piece of the puzzle, but it felt like the more she uncovered, the more questions arose. Lily, the young woman who had caught her eye, was her daughter. There was no denying it now. The pendant, the resemblance, and the strange connection between them all pointed to one undeniable truth. But it was a truth she couldn't face, not yet. Maria had spent years building an empire, crafting a life that was successful in every possible way, but this was different. This was personal. And it felt as if her entire world was crashing down around her. She needed answers. And the only way to get them was to confront Lily again, to unravel the layers of mystery that surrounded them. Maria could no longer ignore the pain of her past. She had to face it, whether she was ready or not. With determination, Maria walked out of the cafe and into the cool night air. The bustling city seemed distant, as if the whole world had shrunk to the space between her and Lily. Her mind raced with 1,000 possibilities, but none of them made sense. Why had Lily never sought her out? Why had she been wearing the pendant without knowing its significance? And most importantly, why had Maria left her behind all those years ago? The questions haunted her, but the answers were just out of reach. As Maria approached the small apartment building where she had found Lily working, her steps slowed. She wasn't sure what to expect. What if Lily rejected her? What if the years of separation had created an insurmountable gap between them? Could she truly hope for a reunion, or was this just a momentary illusion, a glimpse of something that had never truly existed? Maria took a deep breath, steadying herself before pushing open the door. She could hear voices inside, the hum of conversation, and the clinking of dishes. The cafe was busy, as usual, and Lily was still behind the counter, her back to Maria as she worked. Maria approached slowly, her feet almost hesitant, and then she saw Lily turn, her eyes locking with hers. For a moment, they just stood there, staring at each other. Neither of them spoke. It was Lily who finally broke the silence. "You came back," she said quietly, her voice betraying a mixture of surprise and wariness. She hadn't expected Maria to return, not after their brief exchange earlier. "I had to," Maria replied, her voice trembling slightly. "There's so much I need to explain. So much you need to understand." Lily's eyes softened, but there was still a hint of reluctance in her expression. "I don't think I'm ready to hear it," she said, shaking her head slowly. "I've spent my whole life wondering why I was abandoned. Why I never had a mother. And now, here you are, telling me things that don't make sense." Maria's heart clenched, and she could see the pain in Lily's eyes, the years of unanswered questions, the loneliness that had shaped her. She had no idea what her daughter had been through, but she could feel the weight of it now, as if the burden of those years had suddenly become her own. "I know this is overwhelming," Maria said gently, stepping closer to the counter. "But I need you to know the truth. The pendant, it's not just a symbol. It's a connection. A connection to me, to your past, and to the reason we were separated." Lily's gaze flickered to the pendant that Maria still held in her hand. She reached out, her fingers brushing against it again, and Maria could feel the energy of their shared history stirring. "My mother, she always said this pendant would lead me to her. That it was the key to finding her. But how could it be? Why didn't she come for me?" Maria's chest tightened at the question. She had been the one to leave, to walk away. But it hadn't been her choice. She hadn't had the power to stay. And now, years later, the pieces of her past were coming back to haunt her. "It wasn't my choice, Lily," Maria whispered, her voice barely audible. "I never wanted to leave you. I was forced to make decisions that I had no control over. But that doesn't mean I stopped thinking about you. That doesn't mean I didn't miss you every single day." Lily was silent for a long moment, her gaze fixed on the pendant as if it were the only thing that could give her the answers she sought. Finally, she spoke, her voice filled with the pain of a lifetime of unanswered questions. "You don't know what it was like," she said softly. "Growing up without a mother. Not knowing who I was, where I came from. I spent my whole life trying to fill that empty space. But nothing could ever replace the feeling of being alone." Maria's heart ached for her daughter. She had no idea what Lily had been through, what kind of life she had lived. But she knew one thing: she would do anything to make it right. She would face her past, no matter how painful, because Lily deserved the truth. And maybe, just maybe, they could build something new from the ruins of their broken past. "I understand," Maria said quietly. "I can never undo the years that we lost. But I can help you understand what happened. I can give you the answers you deserve." Lily looked up at her, her expression still guarded, but there was a flicker of hope in her eyes. A hope that Maria hadn't seen before. A hope that maybe, just maybe, they could have a future together. But as Maria stepped closer, preparing to tell Lily everything, about the pendant, about the family secrets, and about the truth that had been hidden for so long, something inside her whispered that the journey ahead would not be easy. There were forces at play here, things Maria couldn't fully comprehend, and they were only just beginning to unravel. The truth was out there, but it would come at a price. The air inside the cafe felt thicker now, charged with something neither Maria nor Lily could define. The weight of years lost, of unanswered questions, hung heavily in the space between them. Maria wanted to tell Lily everything, every detail she had kept buried deep inside her for so long, but the words felt stuck, as though the truth itself were reluctant to emerge. Lily, still holding the pendant in her hand, turned it over, her fingers tracing the engraved design. It was as though the piece of jewelry held all the answers, all the memories, and all the pain. But it didn't, at least not yet. Maria had to break the silence. She couldn't wait any longer. "I never meant for this to happen," Maria began, her voice quivering slightly as she spoke. "The decisions I made, they weren't just about me. They were about you, too. But I was forced into a situation where I had no choice. And in the end, I chose to protect you. I had no idea where life would take me, but I always held on to the hope that one day, I would find a way back to you." Lily looked up at Maria, her expression a mix of confusion and disbelief. "You're saying you left because you thought it was the best thing for me?" Her voice was laced with skepticism, as though the words didn't quite make sense to her. "How can you expect me to believe that?" Maria closed her eyes, knowing that no amount of words could ever truly explain what had happened. No amount of explaining could erase the pain of being abandoned. But she couldn't give up on her daughter now. Not when they had this one chance to finally confront the past. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Maria replied quietly. "I don't expect you to understand everything right away. But I need you to know that I never stopped thinking about you. Not for one single day." "That pendant," Maria paused, her fingers lightly brushing the edge of the pendant as she spoke. "It was given to you when you were just a baby. It was meant to be a link between us, a way for you to find me one day." Lily's brow furrowed as she looked at the pendant once more. "But why didn't you come for me? Why didn't you come looking for me when I was older?" Maria took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind 1,000 times, but now that it was real, she found it difficult to speak. The truth felt so heavy, so incomprehensible, that it seemed impossible to put it into words. "Lily, there were things going on that I couldn't control. People, powerful people who didn't want us to be together. I was forced to give you up for your safety. And for mine." She hesitated, trying to gather the strength to say the next part. "I was in danger. And you were the one thing I couldn't protect. I thought if I stayed in your life, it would only put you in harm's way. So, I made the hardest choice I've ever made." The silence that followed felt suffocating. Maria could see Lily's mind working, processing the pieces of the story, but there was still something in her eyes, a resistance, a reluctance to accept what was being said. Lily had spent her entire life in search of her mother, of answers, but the truth was something that would take time to accept. "Are you telling me that I've spent my entire life wondering about you, wondering what happened to my mother, and it was all because you were trying to protect me?" Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "That doesn't make sense. If you loved me, if you truly cared, why didn't you fight for me? Why didn't you find a way to be with me?" Maria's heart broke as she watched Lily wrestle with the harsh reality of the situation. How could she explain the complexities of what she had endured? How could she make her daughter understand the sacrifices she had made? "I tried," Maria said, her voice breaking. "I tried to find a way to be with you. I searched for you for years, after everything settled down. But by then, you had been placed in foster care, and I couldn't find you. I couldn't trace you. And then, life, it kept going, and I kept hoping. And when I found out you were working here, it felt like fate. Like everything had led me to this moment." Lily's eyes softened as she looked at Maria, but the pain was still there, lingering in the depths of her gaze. "But you never told me. You never gave me the chance to know you. I had to live with the idea that you didn't care about me, that you didn't want me." "I did care," Maria whispered, her voice full of regret. "More than anything in this world. But sometimes we make decisions based on what we think is best, not realizing the damage they'll cause." Lily stood there in silence for a long time, the pendant still clutched tightly in her hand. Maria could see the battle within her, the conflict between wanting to trust the woman standing before her and the deep hurt that had been building for years. How could she accept this new reality, this new version of her mother, when so much of her life had been shaped by absence? "I don't know if I can forgive you," Lily said finally, her voice quiet but firm. "I don't know if I can ever understand why you left me. But I want to hear more. I want to know everything. I want to know why you thought this was the only choice." Maria nodded, grateful for the small opening that Lily had given her. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a beginning. And that was enough, for now. "I'll tell you everything," Maria said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. "And I promise, I'll never leave you again. This time, I'll be here. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right." Lily glanced down at the pendant, her fingers still tracing its edges. There was a shift in her expression, a flicker of something that might have been hope. But it was still guarded, still unsure. "I'm not ready to let go of the past," Lily said quietly, looking back up at Maria. "But maybe this is a start." Maria felt a rush of relief wash over her. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. She had opened the door, and now, it was up to them both to walk through it, together. But as Maria looked at Lily, she couldn't shake the feeling that there were more layers to uncover. The pendant had led her to this point, but it might also be the key to something far greater. Something darker. The days following their conversation were filled with tension, but also a cautious optimism. Maria had done her best to reach out to Lily, trying to bridge the gap that years of separation had created. But the space between them still felt wide, and though Lily was no longer pushing her away, she wasn't fully embracing her either. Every word Maria spoke seemed to add another layer to the story, but none of them had truly connected in the way Maria had hoped. It wasn't that Lily didn't want to believe her. She did. The truth, however, was something Lily had spent years running from. She had spent her entire life creating a version of herself that didn't need anyone. She had built walls high enough to keep out even the most well-meaning strangers, let alone a mother who had abandoned her. And now, Maria was standing in front of her, offering explanations that, while true, felt like too much to process. Too much to accept. Maria couldn't blame Lily for that. She could only hope that with time, they could begin to piece together their shared history, one step at a time. But just when Maria thought things might settle into a new normal, something happened that changed everything. She was at home late one evening, going through old family records, trying to make sense of the pieces of her past, when her phone rang. The number on the screen was unfamiliar, but something in her gut told her to pick it up. "Maria?" The voice on the other end was deep, low, and unfamiliar, but there was an urgency to it. "Maria Davis?" "Yes, this is she," Maria answered cautiously, her heart suddenly racing. "Maria, you don't know me, but I know you. I know about your daughter. And I know what you've been trying to uncover. You're getting close, but you don't know the whole story. You need to be careful." Maria froze. The voice was unsettling, the words sending a chill down her spine. "What do you mean? Who is this?" "Someone who wants to help," the voice responded cryptically. "I've been following your investigation, and you're on the right track. But there's more at play here than you realize. The pendant you're holding, it's not just a family heirloom. It's something far more valuable, something that people would kill to get their hands on." Maria's stomach twisted. She had known, deep down, that there was more to the pendant than met the eye. But hearing those words, hearing someone speak of it in such an ominous way, sent a wave of fear through her body. She had always thought that the pendant was simply a link to her past, a symbol of her connection to Lily. But now, it seemed like it was something far more significant. "I don't understand," Maria said, trying to keep her voice steady. "What do you mean? Who are you?" There was a pause, as if the person on the other end was weighing whether or not to continue. Finally, the voice spoke again, quieter this time. There are people who will stop at nothing to get their hands on that pendant, Maria. And once they do, they'll have access to everything you've been trying to find. They'll know things about you, about your family, that you've spent a lifetime trying to keep hidden. Maria's breath caught in her throat. The air felt thick with fear, and she could hear her heart pounding in her ears. Who was this person, and how did they know so much? How could they be so sure of the danger that surrounded her? What do you want from me? Maria asked, her voice barely a whisper. I want to help you, the voice replied. But you need to meet me. I'll explain everything. You don't have much time. The people I'm talking about, they're already looking for you. And if they find you before I do, you won't be able to stop them. Before Maria could respond, the line went dead. She stood there for a long time, the phone still pressed to her ear, staring at the screen in disbelief. Who had just called her? And why had they warned her? What did they know that she didn't? She wasn't sure what to do next. Part of her wanted to call the police, but there was no real evidence of a threat, just a cryptic warning from an anonymous source. But the other part of her, the part that had been hiding from the truth for so long, knew deep down that this wasn't just a random call. Someone knew about the pendant. Someone knew about her past. Maria sat down at her desk, her mind racing. She looked at the pendant again, her fingers gently grazing its surface. For years, it had been a symbol of loss, a symbol of what she had given up. But now, it was a symbol of something much more dangerous. Something that could cost her everything. There was no turning back now. Maria knew she had to find out who was behind this. She had to protect herself and Lily. But more than that, she had to understand the true power of the pendant. What was it that made it so valuable? What secrets was it hiding? The next day, Maria made a decision. She needed to meet the mysterious caller. She couldn't let fear control her any longer. She couldn't run from her past, from the choices she had made, or from the dangers that were now closing in around her. But as she prepared to leave, she had one last thought. She needed to tell Lily. She couldn't let her daughter remain in the dark any longer. She had to share everything, the good, the bad, and the dangerous. Maria sent a quick message to Lily, asking her to meet at the cafe. She needed her daughter by her side. Whatever was coming, they would face it together. As Maria stood up to leave, a sense of dread washed over her. The call had shaken her to her core, but it had also brought a sense of clarity. The pendant wasn't just a link to her past. It was a key. A key that could unlock something much bigger than she ever imagined. And Maria was determined to find out what that was. Victor smiled, a cold, almost knowing smile. You've done well to come this far, Maria. But I'm afraid you still don't understand the bigger picture. Maria's eyes narrowed. What bigger picture? All I see is a dangerous game being played with our lives. What do you want with me? With my daughter? Victor stepped closer, his face growing more serious. You think this is about you? About your family? No. This is about something far bigger than anything you can imagine. The pendant you hold. It's not just a family heirloom. It's the key to unlocking something that's been hidden for generations. Maria felt a knot form in her stomach. Hidden? What do you mean? What's in that pendant? Victor's eyes flickered with something dark, something Maria couldn't quite place. The pendant holds a map. A map to a power unlike anything this world has ever seen. It's part of a long-lost civilization. A group of people who knew things that could change the course of history. Maria shook her head. This is madness. You're telling me this pendant is tied to some ancient secret? Victor nodded, his gaze unwavering. Not just any secret, Maria. This civilization was destroyed centuries ago, but their knowledge, their technology, their power, everything was hidden away. And now, you have the key. That pendant is the key to unlocking it all. Maria felt the weight of his words, the gravity of the situation settling in. It was more than just a family heirloom, more than just a pendant that had been passed down through generations. It was a map to something powerful, something dangerous. And you've been following me because... Maria's voice trembled, but she fought to keep it steady. Victor's smile faded, replaced by something darker. Because you're the one who can find it. You're the one who can unlock it. And I need that power, Maria. I need it for myself. I've waited too long to let this slip away. Maria's heart pounded in her chest. You want to use the power for yourself? To what end? What are you planning to do with it? Victor's eyes flashed with cold determination. The world is changing, Maria. People like me, with vision, with ambition, need the power to reshape it. I don't care about the consequences. I only care about the future. And you'll help me create that future. Maria's stomach churned with disgust. I won't help you. I won't be a part of this. Victor's face hardened. You don't have a choice. The moment you stepped into this, you became part of something much bigger than yourself. And now, you're in my way. Before Maria could react, there was a sudden movement behind her. She turned, and her eyes locked with Lily's, who had stepped into the warehouse without a sound. You didn't think I'd stay in the car, did you? Lily said, her voice steady, though her eyes betrayed the fear she was trying to hide. You don't get to hurt my mother, Victor. Not now. Not ever. Victor's gaze flickered with irritation, but then he smirked, unfazed. This changes nothing. The game is already set. Maria's mind raced. She couldn't let him have the pendant, couldn't let him use it for whatever twisted plans he had. With a quick glance at Lily, Maria made her decision. They weren't leaving here without a fight. The future depended on what they did next.